Hello and welcome to episode 37 of React Native Radio. Today on our panel we have Peter Pikarczyk.
Hey everybody.
I am your host, Nader Dabbit. Today on our show we have a special guest, John Dotan, and he is the creator of React Native Katas. And we're going to kind of talk about learning React Native. We're also going to talk about React Native Katas and how that goes along with kind of learning, and also his experience with building native mobile apps and how he got into React Native. So that's kind of going to be our discussion today. So John, welcome to the show.
Hey Nader, how are you?
I'm doing good. Just hanging in there as usual.
Yeah.
So can you kind of tell us about how you got into programming in general, I guess, and how you became interested in software development?
Yeah, I guess got into programming because I just had like a computer at home, like from age 7. So that was like a while ago. I'm 34 today. So basically, just I think I actually programmed like around 95, 6. Started out in assembler, then C, then Perl, Python. Just progressed through the languages. Did some open source back in 99. I think that was like my first open source project. And then sort of like freelance and got into Java, .NET, and then Ruby. I think I was one of the first Israel-based committers to Rails. And then sort of like did a lot of Ruby, Rails, later Node, and Go. So that's sort of everything that I did in a couple of minutes. But for mobile, I always did native. So I started out with actually J2ME. So that's like the old Nokia variant phones. We did back then like a startup that was sort of Foursquare, but had the timing wrong because we did it just before the economic crisis of 2008. So that crashed us, but we managed to like build a proper J2ME app in Java for the small like Nokia phones. So this was a dumb phone and not a smartphone. And then I got into the iPhone. I really disliked Objective-C. Paused on that. Went to Android like very early on, and did I think a lot of Android work. Made a lock screen. We built like a part of another product. Built like a personalized lock screen that sort of learns who you are, what you like, and then personalizes your experience on an Android phone. So I was a huge Android fan for like, I think 3 years. But then I got to see the ugly parts, and I moved back to iOS and iPhone.
So when you moved back to iOS, was it still Objective-C or was Swift around by then?
Yeah. So you got the point. Like Swift was a big temptation. So I went for Swift. Had to refresh on Objective-C. Found out that a good amount of years passed on, and now Objective-C doesn't look as bad as it looked before. So from then I'm just like a hardcore iOS. And that's it. And I'm never looking back at Android because I got burned so hard that I sort of don't like that experience of development anymore. And then I sort of was a part of a company that built like a cross-platform application builder. So the product that we built allowed any business owner, like a restaurant owner or a club owner, to just go online and create a new app and decide that, all right, I want like an invitation module or an e-commerce module or like an ordering module, whatever I want as a business owner. And then just toggle some switches, decide what colors I want this to be, upload graphics, etc. And then we would take that entire description and generate a proper native app for iOS, Android, and upload this to the market, like each different platform for the respective market. And then you'd get like an app like production ready, etc. So We started that like 5 years ago, and back then, when you wanted to build a cross-platform app, you either like built it per platform natively, or you would use back then it was like HTML5. That was like the new thing. So you had like Backbone. That's like was the most cutting edge framework to use, and you had like jQuery UI, which you never wanted to use for these kind of things. So we took that. We took PhoneGap, which later became Cordova, and most of our time was spent like optimizing CSS and then optimizing JavaScript and markup, just so the Android phones back then, this was Android 2.3, I think, and maybe 3. So these like sort of weak phones would render things like reasonably. So we had memory leaks and problems rendering and, jagged list and janky lists. So all of these problems filled our day-to-day work. So then, like, I think 2-3 years into that, we decided that's enough. We have to like provide a reasonable native experience. So we then forked the entire project and started generating actual native app. So then each feature had to be developed like natively for Android with proper Android developers, natively for iOS with proper iOS developers, and then we would develop like a hybrid version. So then you had like a complete beast that could actually toggle a feature and map it to a technology. So then we would say, all right, we need to make a new feature. Like maybe we have a new idea. Let's make a crazy e-commerce feature. So then we would develop it in a hybrid fashion. Like that was like 2 weeks of work, like nothing. Then it would go out. We would get like the numbers. We would say, all right, that's a good feature. We have to continue. We have to properly build it. We'll build a unit, like a proper team. This team will make the native Android version, native iOS version, and will actually hydrate the hybrid version into a proper native version. So that's how each feature got to have like 3 different implementations, which it sounds like crazy, but it actually worked.
It's fascinating. It's so interesting that the to hear the process of something like that. So basically, you would kind of test it out in hybrid to see if it was like something that people wanted, and then if they did, then you would kind of take it seriously and then build it natively.
Right. So this was like, you could say this was planned, right? You could say this was like part of like a lean and mean way of working. But actually, we had no other choice because we could build this like a hybrid feature, and that's it. But eventually, you want to have like proper premium sort of experience, like animations and not compromise on anything. And then you would go ahead and build that natively. So it sort of worked, and we also it also served us to not invest in anything that was proven to be not successful. So that would make a feature stop at the hybrid part. So we would make the hybrid part, and then if it wasn't so successful, then we would say, all right, let's stop there. We just offered like a reasonable experience. A few users like this, but not too much. So doesn't make sense to invest further. So that's what that's sort of like the was the workflow, and with time we started to ask questions about, so if you build like an experience in hybrid and then build it in mobile, like native iOS and Android, you have 3 different possible experiences, because a hybrid look and feel is sort of like, the middle ground. So buttons looks like a certain way and menus look a certain way. But that's completely different from iOS, flat design, and completely different from the Android material design. So basically we had the technology sorted out. So we had like a hybrid option and native option. iOS, native option Android. But then we had three different experiences. So the hybrid experience was a hybrid experience. It was like a button that looked not like any native platform, and menu that looked like a hybrid menu, and a navigation bar that looked like it has its own look. It didn't resemble any of the proper Android or iOS navigation bars. And then we had like an iOS look, and then the Android material design look. And then the designers and product started like fighting this out. And eventually we came to a conclusion that a user needs to feel at home. So the native option was the best option to go. And that was a hard thing to do in hybrid, because then we had to fake out like an iOS look and feel and then an Android look and feel. And if you ever tried material design on like mobile phones and like hybrid web version of material design, that's a disaster on Androids, ironically, in terms of performance. So then we started looking at things like React, for example, because we were on a backbone stack. That was the best thing to use like 4 or 5 years ago. And we started looking at React Native. So I knew there was something called React Native, and it should be out like any day. And like I put all my bet on that one. It was very risky. And we started building like an iOS version because I knew iOS was going out first. But then Android took too much time. And meanwhile, we bought a company that had their own engine that did like the same thing, but in a different way. And from then on, things just became, I don't know, just blurred. So technology-wise. So we had like too many technology stacks, too many options, and React wasn't coming out with Android. So I had no escape hatch. But then I moved to another company, and then sort of always kept my eye on React Native. And when it was out, I opened React Native Israel meetup, and then pushed the awesome React Native list. I really wanted to promote the community for React Native in Israel, so that we could discuss this thing, because I thought it was like the most amazing thing I saw, because I just finished like living 4 years of hell trying to do something like React Native. So for me, it's like something that is I'm very, very passionate about. That's basically my background, how I started out with React Native.
So I always like to hear about people that kind of came from native development into React Native and kind of get their opinion on it. So obviously you're kind of sold on it, or at least you think it's definitely a viable option. Can you kind of go into what you like about React Native as opposed to going the native route just in general?
Yeah, so for me, I spent quite a bit of time building native apps, and more important than that, I spent quite a bit of time understanding the mindset of each platform. So with Android, you have activities and intents, and sort of like an elegant model of doing like doing like native development, like mobile development. And with iOS, you have like, I don't know, with Cocoa, you have 30 years of experience distilled into a framework, sort of. So each platform comes with its own mindset, and each has like its own trade-offs. But when you start developing and start getting into it beyond, just like building an app and shipping it out, you want to really understand how everything works and connect with the mindset. Then you become like sort of a fan, right? So for me, as time moved on, I sort of was skeptic about React Native, because I knew that on Android you have like a proper sort of mindset that you have years of experience, and on iOS even more. So But as I moved forward, I saw that maybe all of this mindset was actually a reflection of problems. Maybe mobile development shouldn't be that hard, and maybe I should not like uh, learn Android Studio. Maybe I should not learn Xcode in order to just build a mobile app. Maybe specializing on each platform is wrong. Um, and as time moved on, I realized the answer was yes to everything, because um, there's no real reason in 2016 to like sort of properly learn an IDE anymore, because you have like I don't know, 5 great ones, right? And there shouldn't be a reason to properly learn like a designer interface like in Android Studio or Xcode, although they're great, because you have like 10 different like mock-up tools. So if you design stuff, maybe it should be on a designer's tool set. So all these radical ideas started to spring up into my mind. And I realized for the first time, mobile development can be easy. And I think React Native completely delivers on that. So right now, I don't think I'm too afraid to ditch everything I know about mobile development. I think I feel pretty safe with React Native. So for me, I think I'll be happy to just maintain, just enough knowledge with Xcode and iOS, and just enough knowledge with Android and Android Studio and whatever. And that will be the basic knowledge that a person needs in order to like make custom modules or custom interfaces against React Native. And then everything else, all of the rest of the time, I'm happy to spend in React Native, and that's it. So I think that this kind of model will be what the future holds, because I think 2 years in the future or 3 years in the future, people will just develop React Native, and that's it. And from time to time, they'll go around like Xcode and go around Android Studio and go in Java and Objective C or Swift, and then build like a native thing, and then go back to React Native. And if you think about it, it sort of already is that way in every other technology stack that used to be sort of split it on a platform. So if you think about, let's take the most surprising example. So I think 4 or 5 years ago, if you built a website, we all needed to like open a Firefox, whatever version, open Chrome, whatever version, Internet Explorer, whatever version, and you had to like test and build for each sort of platform. And today you don't really need that anymore. And that's sort of a fuzzy example. That's a hard example. An easy example would be you can now build like cross-platform desktop apps, right? With Electron and just like a proper HTML, whatever React stack. So I think people and the human factor will drive everything to be simple. And I think React Native is right there for it to be simple. That's how I approach it.
Yeah, so it's been crazy to me what's been happening over the past few years with like development, right? Like I feel like the paradigms are all sort of coming together. I had some issues learning React Native because I've never built an iOS app before, right? Same with like Android. For me, like that was the hardest part. It wasn't necessarily, oh, how do I learn this syntax, or how do I, like annotate, a UI view or whatever. It was, how the hell do I route? Those are like the tough parts for me.
Yeah. So I guess I think that you have I think you're living in a great time, because you don't have to actually go and learn each platform. For me, it's sort of a sunk cost, because I realized that I spent like, I don't know, in total maybe 4-5 years of spending time with Android Studio and Xcode, and now it's sort of like it's a feeling of letting go, because now I realize that I don't really need to be that sharp on each platform. And with Android you have to like always be on your toes, because every major update breaks everything, and you need to like know which support library you want to use, and as even if Android is so like sort of stable, it still changes, and every time you need to sort of like align everything you know about Android and then go forward. Like Android 5 is completely different from 6 and completely different from 7, and so on and so forth. On the other hand, on iOS, you sort of have a lot of stability. But then I guess Java is as a language and sort of a mindset is simpler than Objective-C, and being that iOS, I think my personal opinion is that iOS presents a deeper framework to work with. It might take more time for a person to learn it. So right now you're in a situation where you only have to know the small things like compiling and maybe making a new React Native module, and then you're done, which is great.
Yeah, and you mentioned so you were like saying that you felt like it was a sunk cost, but in reality, I think having that native understanding about how everything works is so valuable when building stuff with React Native, because even though you rarely have to kind of dip into the native side to build native modules, being able to do that just gives you so much more power, I think, as a React Native developer. That's kind of where I'm trying to increase my skill set right now, is kind of trying to understand more of that side of it. And as someone that came from web, it's still just so new to me, the whole. So I think the fact that you've had so much experience, you kind of overlook the fact maybe a little bit that is very, very powerful. And you can pretty much do anything you would like to in React Native. Whereas someone like me, we're kind of limited still to the APIs that are out there, and then also building fairly simple bridges and things like that. Whereas I think you've literally tried to build something like React Native already, so you could pretty much do anything.
Right. So I think there's something beautiful in what you're saying, Nader, because I think React itself it has like such a small surface area. So you can basically learn React in like a week or two, and then learn like whatever Flux and whatever abstraction you want for like proper architecture. But you can learn it in a pretty defined amount of time, and then progress towards learning each mobile platform and actually enjoy it, because you're coming from a point of power, because you already know how to build an app. You can build like a proper app, and then you want to specialize, which is great, because you're not sort of coming from I want to do this now and I have no idea how to do it. You're just enriching your knowledge, which is, I think, is a good feeling to have when you're learning anything.
So this is something that I've been preaching to my iOS and Android friends who develop natively. I think it's so. So I think that's what some of those developers may not understand. They think that React Native is almost taking their job away. But like Nader, like you mentioned earlier, I think those are the most influential developers and developers that I want to see more of in the React Native community. And, like, I think it's so important to know how to use, so here's like an issue I had, Dotan, with Android Studio on an Android app. And this is something that this was the first time I was implementing push notifications on Android, and it was driving me insane. I didn't know how to solve the multi-dex issue, right, where for whatever reason, Google tries to install 3 different versions of the same thing, right? And all the answers wherever you went was, oh, why don't you enable multi-dex, right? Or why don't you do this or that? And even though I knew that was the easy way out, I didn't do it because I knew, like, okay, there's a reason why I shouldn't. I have to figure this out. But it took me so long to figure out how to fix that issue that I think an Android developer could fix pretty easily,
Well, first, I think, let me apologize for that, because I consider myself like part of the Android community, like back, I think maybe 4 years ago, but this is the sort of thing that like made me run away from it. Because you might be surprised, even if you solve that problem, and even if you were a proper, like, I don't know, experienced Android developer, you still be busy doing these sort of things, because I saw it every day. Like every day there was some kind of breakage, some kind of API, some kind of jars, some kind of DEX, whatever. But every day you had this thing. Now, if you throw in like ProGuard, which is like an optimizer that drops code under your feet just to keep like your app lightweight, then you had like a completely different a world of pain. But yeah, what you're feeling is just, I think, this is my personal opinion, is sort of like just the tip of the iceberg. You just experienced Android development. But yeah, this is like, you. I don't think you should be worried about it. Don't think this is something personal to you. I think even if you became sort of experienced, you still have this kind of I don't know, like sort of not related to programming problems, because like build problems and whatever. I don't know why. I think maybe this is like Android being afraid to break APIs, because it's like all over the place and there's thousands of different vendors of devices. So breaking APIs is really, really bad. So then you have to live with what you have and then just progress forward with additional stuff and never make a proper, like a rewrite API breaking changes.
Yeah. And I don't know. Okay, so you've definitely been, doing this for much, much longer than I have. And I think I'm getting to the point now where I'm starting to identify, even the difference between a good library and a bad library, something that I want to trust to use personally versus something, that I'm going to end up having to read through the code, fix or fork myself. And I think maybe it's just because I've only messed around with a few programming languages and a few ecosystems, but maybe they're all like this, right? JavaScript is very fragmented, right?
Right.
Unfortunately, these days, it's an easy language to learn, and people think because they can write syntax that they're good at JavaScript. And when they think they're good at JavaScript, they release modules that are, written in JavaScript, but they may not understand architecture. So those modules end up falling apart the second you want to use it for, your use case, right? So, and I think that's sort of like the pain like that I'm starting to face. You have probably have more experience in this too, but like I wish there was an easy way to say like, hey, stop, writing open source modules and let someone else take care of this until until you're at the level you should be to write them. And I know that's not right? Like, there's definitely different ways to go about this, and I'm sure people don't necessarily want to hear me saying that, but that's almost how I feel right now. Like let the people that know what they're doing write the modules, and you'll get there eventually. Like, is that too harsh?
Yeah, well, I think you just said something not many people are saying, but they're thinking that, but they're not saying it. So I'll just join you because I think you're completely right. But I think it's sort of like a paradox. So as easy a platform is, then you probably get a lower quality things in that platform. So let's take, for example, because we talked about, let's take Android versus like NPM JavaScript. So Android is hard. If you're an Android developer, you have to like make your app, and then you have like at least take 10 different devices and test on these devices. And then you find out that each device has a weird behavior that is not documented at all because it's, I don't know, made by some unknown company in China. Although there are great companies in China. But some companies just build their own Android version with missing APIs, and you find out only when you run the device and it explodes in your face. So this is the battlefield that Android developers are in. And that creates developers that are totally like either pessimistic or totally like, they know what they're going for. They want to create better, more quality libraries, product, services, because they feel the pain, because they are in that kind of bad scenario. On the other hand, you have JavaScript. So JavaScript is an easy language, and even more, you have Node and you have V8, which are very forgiving VMs. You can write like bad code and it will perform great, which is amazing. And then you have like Chrome, which runs that code, and very rarely you'll actually see bad code in your eyes or feel it. So that's a really, really low barrier to entry. And once you have that, you have like a low barrier for, I guess, modules, services, libraries, and that's I guess that's the reality. But GitHub has sort of like a metric. So you have stars and you have watches and you have issues and you have pull requests. So maybe just thinking ahead here, maybe we should all like have a sort of like a metric that incorporates issues, pull requests, stars, watches, and then you'd know which library is like a proper, quality, useful library. I don't know. But yeah, I'm more suspicious in the JavaScript community, and I was part of the early days of the Ruby communities and Node community in general, and Go community. And I think Node and JavaScript, there I become the most suspicious. I go read the code by default. So that's me.
So I'd like to ask you about, so we can kind of switch more now to learning React Native and your experience kind of like with React Native Katas and why you wrote it or why you built it. Can you kind of talk about what React Native Katas is and why you decided to build it?
Yeah. So what it is a way to learn stuff. So if you go back, like I think 5-6 years, the Ruby community was prospering, and also a bit of Python community was prospering. You had Rails and you had Django, which might ring some bells if you did like backend work like 5-6 years ago. And there was like a new movement of developers, like pragmatic developers, and people started seeking more efficient ways to learn things. And back then, a new concept was a kata. So a kata is something that you practice. Sometimes it looks, like in vain, like not doesn't have a certain purpose, but it's something that you practice, and by practicing it, you suddenly gain some knowledge, like as an implicit thing. So if you think about it, you have it like in martial arts. So in martial arts, you practice katas, like in karate. You practice movements, and then sometimes later in the future, these movements become composed into like a complete, fight or whatever. This is a negative example, but it's martial arts. So, and then you could apply the same thing to programming. So like a Ruby kata is like going over the syntax and giving you small digestible chunks of code where you just complete the missing part. and there is a test runner that keeps running and shows you which kata passes, which kata fails, etc. So that's like a Ruby kata, and then you maybe have a kata for a database. So MongoDB was out again 4 or 5 years ago, and then there was like a MongoDB kata where you could just write code that implements queries, and then you would achieve like success if your query was right. So it's like a small fun things to do, which is very immersive. You are living inside the environment you're supposed to work in. So these were the katas back then. And for me, I guess I sort of realized how the potential for, let's say, non-programmers or really complete beginners is with React Native. Because there was the story on a certain Friday, I built an app like on a single Friday with React Native. It was very easy. And then I built it like with boxes and I'm not doing the design up front. But my wife is a designer, so it was easy to just request a design. So I prepared the entire Saturday for implementing this design. Now, from native mobile, I know this is like a big deal, and you have to be pixel perfect, and each platform will show you its ugly face, and then you'll just spit some blood and then work your design in. So I prepared the entire Saturday for that. So Saturday morning, 9 a.m., I get designs from my wife, and then around 10:30 a.m. I finish. That's it, done. And then I just sat around and realized this is the platform for designers, for mockups, for beginners. It's insane. So then I decided to build something that could teach complete beginners what is React Native and teach even designers what is React Native or to build with React Native. And then if you think about it, how would you do such a thing? Would you go for, okay, let's teach them JavaScript or React or, I don't know, JSX? And I figured the best thing to do is to start with something visual. And maybe the best thing to do is start with something that sort of resembles markup, which is HTML. So these were the assumptions. So everyone should know HTML, right? And everyone should like playing with visual things. And then I figured, right, there was this kata thing 5 years ago. Maybe I should combine the approaches. And I think it sort of clicked. And what I did is start in a completely different way. I went into React Native, and then I wanted to build this infrastructure that takes visual snapshots of your whatever you're doing, and then on background compares the UI, and then diffs images, and then shows you which part of the image was different in an animation-like way, which was a huge thing to do. I managed to build that in a few days, but then it was so slow because it was working out of process. It was like watching your simulator run. And then I realized the perfect environment is right under my nose. It is actually React Native itself. So maybe I could combine live reload, and maybe I could combine the way you're building things. You should live in your editor. And then I figured there should be an infrastructure to take snapshots, and I found it within React Native. And then a few days later, I built the entire thing from scratch inside React Native, and it worked even better. So the way it works is you get a kata, which is sort of like a small exercise. You get the bad form first, which is should be an interface that looks really, really bad. You can click it and see where you should go. And then you see the visual, properly designed interface. And all you have to do is go into the, JS6, a component, edit out the styling, edit out the markup or JSX, until, like step by step, until you get the proper final design. So every time you do that, you get feedback. You get, all right, this is not good enough, so you're still going to see the bad version. Once you succeed, you automatically progress into the next stage, into the next kata. So that's a sort of like an immersive, like be there and experience how it is to build things without committing to really building an app and, generating a project and scratching your head and deciding, all right, what is an app? What is iOS? You don't need to know anything. You just need to go there, edit a file, achieve success, and then edit the next file and then progress. And I think once you're finished with that, you have a good understanding of what JSX is, what's React Native, what's the styling, and then you move on to actually maybe learning to program, maybe learning what is React, maybe learning what is React Native, etc. So that's what I got to build. And for first experiences with designers, I tested this on real people, and it was amazing. It was like sitting beside people who are playing a game, and laughter and smiles and wow, this is fun and this is nice, and why did you do that thing? And this is like makes a really fun, like interactive experience, like solving a puzzle. And that gave me the energy to keep moving. And then I like made a logo, and I figured this is a good thing, so I sort of like put my own energy into it.
So, can you kind of go over your experience? Have you ever like had to train someone in iOS or train someone in Android as like a new developer? And can you kind of go into like how you view someone being able to get up and running and become productive in React Native kind of versus just a traditional native platform?
Yeah, so I guess we have the perfect environment for that, because here in Klarna we have like a sort of a Sunday React Native hub, which is basically a meetup, like a small scale meetup, really maybe 10 people, where we're saying, come have free coffee, have free office space, just come around, sit around the same table, work on your React Native projects, ask questions, ask for help, etc. So really want this to be like a shared space without a commitment of, bothering people. So everyone can come and be independent and just do React Native and ask questions and whatever around the table. So what I experienced is maybe I sort of like I thought there were going to be a lot of people doing already React Native, already fully immersed in their project. But instead, there are like a lot of people that are newcomers that really want to understand what this is about and want to get help, like bootstrapping a project, and want to get help with the basics. And from what I experienced so far, I think most people maybe take around an hour or two, given they have sort of some sort of like a programming experience. Maybe an hour or two until they get productive. And I think the next week we meet, this is like a weekly thing. The next week or the next 2 weeks, they already have an app, which is amazing. So I think there is not much like a barrier for entry. There are some problems, of course. I'm sure you guys know these problems, like navigation and all the rest of the things that really comes back to bite you. And the answer would be, basically whatever's working for that moment. So, and also you have like the Flux related question, like what should I use, Redux, Mobex, or whatever, but these questions are always there, right? So if not Redux today, maybe Mobex tomorrow, and maybe another framework next year. But I don't think there is any friction that resembles any native friction that exists in iOS or Android, which is amazing.
I agree to that point as well. And one of my favorite things about platforms is there's more or less one way to handle anything. Whereas in JavaScript, you can make a request 5 different ways, right? And there's so many different libraries just to make a request. Swift has Alamo Fire, right? Android has OK HTTP, right? But JavaScript has Axios and Fetch, Wig Fetch, Isomorphic Fetch, GitHub Fetch, right? And that's only the tip of the iceberg.
But even with all of the nuances that are different within the web, coming to this from the web, and then kind of comparing my experience trying to do native, I still feel like it's just so much easier, to just get things working and all of that stuff. There's always going to be issues as far as like trying to decide between like your data architecture and things like that. But overall, it's been so much easier for me and for a lot of people that I've talked to.
So I think maybe to complement what you're saying, Nader, if you'll notice, React Native comes with a lot of tooling, like out of the box. I think almost from day one, but like the inspector and profiling and systrace, and add to that like the entire stack of React specific tooling that you get. So these things, I don't think they were available from day zero with PhoneGap and Cordovine, all of these other hybrid platforms. And I think maybe in some form they are part of the force that pushes React Native forward. And I think I wish to see as much tooling as possible around React Native, because from my experience, I know that once you do like this kind of abstraction layer over platforms, you have a lot of magic. And from my experience, you want to have tools that diagnose this magic and expose this magic and make this magic reasonable, and that you could just pop the hood and understand what's going around. Which connects to something I just finished working on, which I called React Native Snoopy. But that is one tool that you can plug into your own app. It hooks into the React Native message queue, which is the internal component that connects between the JavaScript and the native world. And it lets you sniff the events that go back and forth, and lets you diagnose the events, and lets you maybe chart out the events and make sure you're not sending things that are too heavy, not having calls that are unexpected. And for example, with the list view, if you scroll back and forth and you see too much chatter around the message queue, then that's a good sign that something is not performing well. And I'm able to just give you a library where you can just plug into this event stream and just do whatever you want with it. So this is something I just finished, but I had to monkey patch React Native in order for it to work. I later submitted a pull request for React Native, which was accepted and will be public in version 0.33, I think. And then I'll just go public with that. But if you want to see it, it's on my GitHub. And it should work with your existing React Native. You can play with it. And there's also an animation that sort of visualizes what this thing is and what it does. But I think the bottom line is that it was fairly easy and fairly fun to do. And that just reflects well on React Native, because it's like an internal thing, and I could just go ahead and grab stuff from it and expose and make a tool out of it, which is amazing. I mean, as any other platform, I just can't imagine how that would be possible.
And for anyone listening that's looking to kind of learn React Native, John has a really good repo called Awesome React Native. I think he mentioned it earlier, but it has just an insane amount of references and links to pretty much anything that you'd like to learn about React Native. Tutorials, blog posts, documentation, just all kinds of stuff. So it's called Awesome React Native, and it's on his repo. And I would encourage anyone to kind of go check that out and maybe keep up with it if you're looking for new things. You kind of keep that up to date pretty good.
Yeah. Every morning I have a ceremony where I go over pull requests and go check out the components and then merge them in. But yeah, I knew I knew React Native was going to like explode. So, and I knew someone would need to, put some order into whatever is out there. So if you'll check this, like I made this repo, like I think maybe a couple days after React Native was announced to be open source. So I just knew this was going to be a big thing. And also I have like the book, Programming React Native, which I wrote, I think, maybe half a year ago. And that's like free. So you can go ahead, and I think there's a link within the awesome list for it. And that's also a challenge, because how do you write a book for a technology that keeps changing? But
Yeah, absolutely. How has that been? Has it been kind of a lot of going back and updating like things and kind of a lot of work, or was it you get the main thing done, you kind of go back and tweak things, but it's not that much work?
yeah, so sort of it started out as like, I was helping out some companies implement React Native, and also had like an accumulated knowledge about things that maybe today is public, or sort of like an experience with it. So I decided, instead of just chanting the same things over and over again just for different people, that I read a book. So I started writing it. Took maybe a month of full time, like dedication, like from 8 a.m. to whatever 10 p.m. I wanted to do it as quickly as possible, so that I managed to not lose on the update game. Because if I take too much time, then React Native won't be the same React Native I'm writing about, right? It's tricky. So I decided to like take an entire month and do it in one fell swoop. Um, and then I realized that even after 1 month, React Native changed enough that it made me, unsure about should I release this book or not. So then this book like sat on my hard drive for like, I think 2 months. And then I realized, what am I doing? Should I rewrite this? Should I even bother? Maybe should I scratch it? I don't know. But then I decided to like open it and put it out for free, which sort of, it's if you're not paying for it, then maybe you'll understand that this is like something that documents a technology that it's completely in flux, like it's changing all the time. So then I put it out, and then I didn't realize this was going to be such a big hit. I just wanted it off my table. So then it became like this huge hit, um, and now I have a lot of new material that I want to, to include in this book. So now I think I'm sort of waiting for React Native and the ecosystem around it to sort of stabilize, until I make a big update. Because if I do an update now, then it will probably be, I don't know, invalid like in 2 weeks or a month. But I feel there is some sort of like stability coming, maybe after navigation experimental is properly done, and I think maybe windowed list is properly done, the big, huge challenges will be solved. Then maybe it would be a good time to make an overhaul, like a complete refresh of the book. But I think like the first part of the book is stating clearly, writing a book for cutting edge technology is crazy. So that's why in the book I didn't like do like this holding hands, let's build an app together. I did like an analysis of an app. So you could like go over an app, like a complete sample app, and understand how I think around it and how I reason about things. So this kind of book, this kind of like writing, I believed is going to transcend time. So wherever I could, I avoided adopting like specific technologies and specific tricks that are I knew they're going to be invalid within, I don't know, a few months. So that's also a reason why I didn't adopt Redux or any form of Flux. I just invented a tiny form of Flux with Event Emitter, and like with the reader, we agreed that this is a good thing, and I progressed to writing the rest of the app. But yeah, that's sort of how I tackled it, and it sort of came to me step by step, where I like finished the thing with Redux, and then I realized, what the hell? There's a new Redux now. There's a new React router, and then scratched everything and rewrote the suitable chapters, clear of any Redux or any Flux implementation, and that stood the test of time because now it didn't have to change whenever anything in the JavaScript ecosystem changed. So these were like my tricks for this book. And I hope it's still relevant.
Very cool. Yeah, I mean that's so much. So you have the book, you have the repo, and then you have also the Katas. That's a lot of stuff out there for React Native people. So that's pretty cool. Thank you.
Great. I'm happy to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Honestly, to see some katas in the future, it would almost be cool if. So right now it's sort of like getting started with React Native. Where I think this really gets excited is almost the other side of it, like for advanced levels where you start learning how to build React Native, right? So I guess that's a little trickier because that code base is crazy and things are always moving. But I think it would be. I'm personally excited just to have it as a segue for people to jump into building React Native instead of just using it. Something down the road, maybe a year or two from now. But I think it's got a lot of potential.
Yeah, that is very, very interesting. I think, I think that it sort of waits for fresh ideas. Like, how about Katas for building native modules, right? So you have to build this module in order to, I don't know, like make a custom interface. You have to go and implement this native module in Android and go and implement the native module in iOS. I think that would be a great idea. Yeah.
Oh my goodness, that would be if there were katas to build native Android modules, I would be the happiest person on the planet. Just because. So I started writing up a few small tutorials that I haven't released yet. And I think there's actually a generator in the React Native code base that hasn't been documented, which is kind of interesting. But especially if you don't have any Android experience, building your own native modules, as simple as they could be, are such a pain in the butt. It's not easy because you don't know where to put anything, right? And let's say a lot of times you want to use a native module for a background service, right? So you want something running in the background, but you may not know that you use a service for that, right? Or you don't know how to then, differentiate the difference between a normal, Android module and then a service, and how it all kind of plays together, So that I think that would be so powerful.
Yeah, I would say the one thing that I wish that there was more of is how to get into that, because that's the one thing a lot of web developers coming into React Native kind of don't understand, or that maybe that seems to be the main obstacle for them to kind of get to that productivity level that they'd like to be at. So if anyone listening wants to do that, or if I have any free time, I'll hopefully maybe put together some tutorials. But if anyone listening feels like doing that, that would be awesome for the community for sure.
Yeah, that would be amazing. I think maybe from this conversation, maybe we can extract like metadata, right? So I think maybe there should be like a single place where maybe JavaScript developers could go to in order to learn the native part of React Native. Maybe, I don't know, I'm just throwing it in the air now.
Yeah, absolutely. That would make a lot of sense.
Yeah, maybe a list of like sort of, sealed, approved resources where you can just go through like one by one, step by step, and then sort of like progress into learning just what you need in order to build like native modules. So I don't know, maybe for iOS it would be, okay, so go like make this small, tiny, iOS tutorial just so you get used to Xcode, and that should take maybe half an hour of your time. And then maybe go around Android and build a small app, and that, maybe something like that. Like the first steps for JavaScript developers into like the native part of React Native, maybe.
All right. Well, I think we'll go ahead and get to the picks. Peter, do you have any picks?
Yeah, so I've got one pick that has motivated me to hit the books again with JavaScript, and that's alf.nu/return true, just one word. And what it is it basically it tests your JavaScript skills, and has a bunch of, so the premise is return true to it, right? So whatever you do, you're coming up with arguments, so the function returns true. I guess it's sort of similar to the whole kata thing, right? They get harder and harder and harder as you go on, which is kind of neat. And then you can kind of see the other types of examples or submissions others have posted too, so you can learn a lot.
Okay, great. Yeah. So, John, do you have any picks?
This one is a new list I'm starting called Awesome Aha. So this is about like these aha moments that you, like as a programmer, a software engineer, you get along your life, like a professional life. So I think like 20 years back, there was always these pivotal things that I either read or did that sort of forged my thinking. And I really wanted to document it and also, look for new things. So I'll just post it here in the list. It's on my GitHub, just called Awesome Aha. But basically, you have like functional programming and the things that really makes this thing sync in your brain, and just generally programming, a bit of about open source. And I still have a lot of offline items I need to include here. I just want to document per item the exact things that you should gain out of it, so you can just pick what you want and not just read everything.
Okay, great. I have two picks. The first one is a book. It's called Deep Work. It's written by Cal Newport. It's called Deep Work: Rules for Focused Success in a Distracted World. And it's a really, really one of the best books I've read in a while, honestly. But so it talks about how to kind of cancel out all the distractions around you when you're kind of doing something extremely important. But it also talks about how a lot of other extremely successful people have gone about creating success and kind of how their minds work. So it's not just about staying away from distraction. It's also about a lot of psychology and things like that. So I would highly recommend that book for anyone, Deep Work. The second pick is kind of something that I've been thinking about doing for a while, and I finally got around to figuring a way out to test the idea. It's called the Coding Bootcamp book, and it's going to be on Kickstarter at the time of this release. So basically, I've been wanting to write a book for people who don't have the time or money to get into a coding bootcamp, but want to learn all the skills necessary. So this is going to be a huge undertaking, if you can kind of guess, for someone brand new in the industry, teaching them everything from the basics all the way to kind of mobile app development. But with React Native and Cordova and a lot of the things out there, I think it's possible. But I'm putting it on Kickstarter because it's going to kind of take a lot of my time away from a lot of projects that I'm currently doing consulting for. So the website is codingbootcampbook.com or thecodingbootcampbook.com. They both redirect to codingbootcampbook.com. But it'll also be on Kickstarter for about 30 days. So we'll see how that pans out. If it does well, it's going to be a really cool project. I've had a lot of good feedback from some people that I've talked to that I highly respect, and they think it's something that's needed. So if you're listening and you want to check that out, I would appreciate it. Okay, well, that wraps up episode 37 of React Native Radio. John, thank you for joining us.
Great. Happy to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Hopefully we'll have you back again in the next couple of weeks or couple of months.
Yeah, I'll be happy to.